Have you ever wondered about the Second World War? How about D-Day? Well, if so, then you are in luck, because I'm about to teach you everything you would ever want to know. There are a couple of really important things I'm going to try to get across to you. A lot of casualties. First, D-Day was a success on all 5 beachheads, and the major objective was met. Second, is that D-Day was a very important turning point in the war. This showed people that the Allies had victory so far in the war, and it gave them an important strategic foothold on the city of Normandy, which would later on be able to help the other Allies liberate France. The last is that if there had never been a D-Day, the Allies would never have won the war, or at least the war would have gone on longer than it did, in my opinion. On D-Day, there were 5 beachheads officially classified by the United States Army. There was Omaha, Gold, Sword, Juno, and Utah Beach. On every beach, there was a major objective set by the and although heavy casualties throughout the day, over 10,000, the objective was met on every single beach. Every beach had a different story. On Omaha Beach, there were a lot of casualties, the most on any beach in the attack, over 2,000. However, this was unexpected. Americans had bombarded the beaches for days leading up to the attack. However, the German forces on Omaha Beach knew this already. They had moved the defenses further inland, so the American strikes fell way short of actually doing any damage significantly to the defenses, leaving the beaches littered with MG nests and places for the Germans to hide. The Americans were still relatively well prepared for this. After they broke through the Atlantic Wall, the first wave of attackers carried things that were pretty much handheld torpedoes. What these were meant to do would clear German sea and land walls that were originally meant to keep Americans specifically for D-Day. However, Germans had two specific types of machinery that were specifically designed. One is the floating tank, which would carry troops in and out of the beach, provide supporting and cover fire. It was called the floating DD tank, and it was used significantly throughout. Despite all this, the attack on this beach started out so bad that General Omar Bradley, the leader of the American division of D-Day, was ready to call off the attack unless he saw results sooner. In short, the sheer numbers of the American forces were finally able to charge up the hill of Omaha and capture it. What happened were American reinforcements, especially Army Rangers supported by regular infantry and floating tanks, were able to finally win the long, gruesome battle on Omaha Beach and get up the hill, although heavy casualties.
One surprising thing about D-Day classified by the United States Army was Gold Beach. Gold Beach was so important because the objective of Gold Beach was to capture Mulberry Harbor, which was thought as to be the most important point because it was a foothold on the city of Normandy. However, a surprising thing about this was that the attack here had much fewer casualties and much fewer defenses by the Germans, because the Germans had previously believed that the Americans had thought that Omaha Beach was the most important. So they sent most of the defenses there, when in reality, they really need to be on Gold Beach. The objective of the entire Normandy campaign was to capture Normandy and advance further into France, and eventually liberate France from German control, since Germany had taken France in prisoner earlier in the entire war. This would have more free French troops to fight with them, and would bolster all the Allied forces in numbers and in experience. They had managed to liberate France, and the Allies would have their first unblocked path towards Germany in the entire war. They figured that the way through Normandy was through the northern coast, and to find that area they would be attacked into 5 regions, as I had already stated. I previously talked about Gold Beach, which I called the most important. Now I'm going to tell you why. It's the most important because it led to Mulberry Harbor, which I have also previously mentioned. Mulberry Harbor was a harbor in the northern coast in the central part of Normandy, and this led to the sensitive key was a supply point. It was, if they were taking this, then the Americans would have a place to land their troops and to land supplies. It would give them a real foothold on Europe and the entire city of Normandy. From here, they would be able to do things they were unable to do, like land troops. As previously mentioned, D-Day was extremely vital to the Allied success in the Normandy campaign and victory in the Second World War. There was never a D-Day, or if D-Day had not been won the battle, things in the war had played out much more differently than they would have. In all likelihood, the Germans would have won the war. The Allies would have no foothold in Europe, they would have never captured France and never moved into Berlin. All they had to do was keep the Allied forces at bay in the other parts of the world. Things would have been so much different. The world today would have been different. One reason I believe this to be true is because this is the first real Allied victory in the war. The Allies needed something to help support their cause, prove they were in the war to win, and nothing so far had major battle was executed to near perfection. Although there was casualties, it was executed well. The battle was almost like a Game 7 in sports. It was a must-win situation. If they had lost the battle, things would have gone much worse from there. One reason that I think it was so important, it was because the first in a chain of events that was so important. It eventually led to Allied victory in the Second World War. and those battles led to other battles. And through this process, slowly, little by little, the Allies made their advance into Germany. The most important of any of these campaigns was the liberation war. Germany had invaded and captured France, leaving the Allied forces trapped inside, unable to help. Although a few very little Free French troops were able to help the Allies and support them, many of these didn't make any difference. If the Allies were able to capture France and liberate the French troops living there, then the Allies would have severely more numbers than the Germans and would have been able to help more with the war effort. The war, as we all know, ended in victory for the Allies. But this victory, it was the last one, was the final link in the chain for the Allies. A chain that started with the link called D-Day. Without this link, the entire chain would have collapsed. The first link is always the most. As previously stated, the results on the beachheads were all the same. Allied victory. Although there were over 10,000 casualties, this cost was well worth it, because it gave the Allies an important foothold on Europe, and through Normandy, a gateway to Europe. And also the Allies' harbor of Mulberry Harbor, a place to land all their supplies and troops, and the first real foothold on the state of France. This led to the chain of events that would lead Americans to first take Normandy, then free and liberate France, and the French people and troops that would give them a direct pathway into Europe. In my opinion, D-Day was such an important turning point in the war that if there had not been a D-Day, if it had never happened, the Allies would never have captured France or Germany, and most likely have lost the Second World War.